traits have given Ice Age humans on each other, even in the most challenging of environments. Could these traits have given Ice Age humans a survivability edge over the Neanderthals?
When times are rough, social networks suddenly become extremely important. It's very important if you can go to the next group over and somehow be connected to them and somehow be taken in or helped out.
Homo sapiens may have had another advantage. Like the Chukchi, they carefully crafted cold weather clothing.
Clothing was one of the most important innovations brought into Europe by modern humans. But that was made possible by one of the most important artifacts ever invented, the eyed needle made of antler or ivory, which enabled people to sew clothing and fit it to people.
But perhaps the simplest explanation for our ancestors' survivability may be their greater numbers.
Modern humans can reproduce extremely fast. The result of that is that human population expansion is very quick. What we know about Neanderthals is not only are they living in small groups, but the overall population seems to have been extremely small.
By 40,000 years ago, the Neanderthals, Denisovans, and all other archaic species were, for the most part, gone.
There were 4 or 5 species wherever we went, but we were the survivors because we brought with us very sophisticated ways. Wherever we went, but we were the survivors because we brought with us
archaic species were, for the most part, gone.
There were 4 or 5 species wherever we went, but we were the survivors because we brought with us very sophisticated ways of looking at the world, division of labor, very extensive toolkits for hunting and gathering, and gradually, I don't think it was a holocaust. I think that in terms of a model, I see us displacing people.
By 25,000 years ago, we had reached all the lands between the Atlantic and the Pacific, including the Arctic. By 25,000 years ago, we had reached all the lands between the Atlantic and the Pacific, including the Arctic. And we're poised on the cusp of a vast new territory. By now, the last great ice age had reached its peak, and the world became even colder. As the seas froze and ocean levels dropped, a new land appeared in the waters of the Bering Straits that would eventually connect North America and Asia. This land called Beringia would last at least 10,000 years, and for long stretches may have looked like the cold, rocky landscape of today's far eastern Siberia. Here, another Arctic people, the Yupik, live off the land, or in this case, the sea. And they travel over and through the icy waters in another echo from the past, the skin boat Umiak. When the sea freezes solid, people can walk or sled across the ice. But when the ice breaks up, the Umiak is light enough to carry and sturdy enough to row, a perfect Beringian vessel. Making one is a fairly quick operation, and Niobe joins in. Up here in the Arctic, every resource is precious, so all the wood in this frame has probably had several lives already. This could have been a door frame once. Now, it's about to go out to sea. When the boat's frame is ready, it's covered with a single walrus skin. Shaved so thin, it's almost transparent. What's remarkable about this kind of boat is that every part of it can be found in a completely treeless landscape. Skin, driftwood, they may have even trekked at least part of the way across, when ice didn't block their progress. Regardless, by 15 to 20,000 years ago, our ancestors set foot upon a land no one but animals had entered before. Although archaeological Regardless, by 15 to 20,000 years ago, our ancestors set foot upon a land no one but animals.
Hey, listen, here we go. There's so much eggs in this basket.
Archaeological and other evidence pointed to America's first people crossing the Bering Straits from Asia, discoveries of ancient artifacts that appeared European in origin led to a counter-theory. That the first Americans actually crossed the Atlantic, not the Pacific. That the first Americans actually crossed the Atlantic, not the Pacific. And beyond the scientific findings, many Native Americans believe they are neither Asian nor European. And beyond the scientific findings, many Native Americans believe they are neither Asian nor European.
Yeah, they're Canaanites, descendants of Cham.
And beyond the scientific findings, many Native Americans believe they are neither Asian nor European.
Yeah, we Asian, the Afro-Asiatics.
That their people have always been here. In 1968, a chance discovery in the hills near Bozeman, Montana, would begin a 45-year saga that finally unmasked the origins of America's first people.
Oh, here we
Sarah
go.
Anzic was just 2 years old when that discovery occurred on her family's land.
Oh, shit.
What I've been told is that these construction workers who had received permission from my father to extract landfill for a local high school project were actually just digging the dirt out, and one of the construction workers noticed one of these giant artifacts that had come tumbling out from the site.
To their amazement, they would unearth over 100 stone and bone artifacts, all about 13,000 years old. Shane Doyle is a Crow Indian historian who has studied these artifacts identified as belonging to Clovis people.
The Clovis culture had a very
Historian who has studied these artifacts identified as belonging to Clovis people.
The Clovis culture had a very distinctive style of fluting that they used to make their spear points and their arrowheads. So you can see how it's been fluted down the middle here and would actually be attached to a larger wooden spear point. These were all the tools that they needed to get by on a daily basis by hunting and gathering. They were hunting everything from woolly mammoths to bison. And so they needed these. These were its most precious commodities as far as survival goes.
But why did they bury such valuable and important items? The answer soon became clear. As the men dug below the artifacts, they were stopped in their tracks by a young boy's skeleton covered in red ochre. They had chanced upon a burial site of one of the oldest human skeletons ever discovered in North America. Covered in red ochre. They had chanced upon a burial site of one of the oldest human skeletons ever discovered in North America. As a child, Sarah Anzic was hardly aware of the discovery's significance. But she became a molecular biologist, and in the 1990s was working on the Human Genome Project when she realized an opportunity to discover the true origins of Native Americans might lie with DNA from the Clovis child's skeleton, now carefully stored away.
And I started thinking about, we have an ancient remains that's 13,000 years old, and so I kind of began to put two and two together, thinking, wow, wouldn't it be really neat if we could take a glimpse into the ancient past through the genome sequencing of this ancient individual.
Sarah decided to contact local Montana tribes to see if they would have objections similar to those voiced by Native Americans when scientists tried to recover DNA from the Kennewick man. The discovery of a 9,000-year-old skeleton in Kennewick, Washington, had triggered a contentious legal battle. Native Americans said the bones were sacred and should be reburied, while scientists wanted the knowledge their DNA could provide. Go back. Native Americans said the bones were sacred and should be reburied, while scientists wanted the knowledge their DNA could provide. The battle was ongoing when Sarah approached the Montana tribes asking to do DNA studies of the Clovis child.
One of the tribes was quite supportive and interested in my findings, and the second tribe, on the other hand, were not.
Sarah decided to go forward anyway, but she had never worked with ancient DNA, a far more difficult process than sequencing fresh DNA. So on her own time, at a private lab, she began practicing on old animal bones, and failed.
And so at that point, given the challenges and the obstacles and the heated debate with the Kennewick man, I just put everything aside and took a rest.
The hiatus would last 10 years. But in 2009, over in Copenhagen, DNA hunter Eska Villesjø, who had been so disappointed with the school cave tooth results, was asked by Sarah to lead a new effort to recover the genome of what was now being called the Anzic child. The Copenhagen team, with Sarah joining in, went to work. Unlike the much older school setting, they were able to get strong DNA signals right away. They focused on recovering DNA from regions called haplogroups. Strands of DNA sharing common mutation patterns that go deep into the past. They then compared Anzic's distinctive patterns to the genomes of nearly 150 modern populations around the world, and to a few ancient population samples previously decoded. It took the team 4 years, but they finally narrowed down exactly where the genes of the Anzic child had come from.
These findings were really significant. For one, that they refuted the Solutrean hypothesis, where the first Americans came across the Atlantic and they're European in descent. They're not.
As expected, major elements of the Anzic child's genome came from across the Pacific. 1/3 of the boy's genome matched genes from a 24,000-year-old Siberian skeleton. So he's part ancient Siberian. His other genes match those of ancient East Asians, so 2/3 of his genome comes from them. But this specific genetic combination can no longer be found in any living populations west of the Bering Strait, only in living Native Americans east of the strait. So what does this mean?
So basically you can almost imagine, these two very distinct groups of people meeting each other, interacting, and you could say the child of those, if you want, is actually, genetically speaking, Native Americans, right? And then the question was, when is this happening? Where is it happening?
What we believe is that there was a cross between Eastern Asians and Siberian up in the Bering Strait, and they crossed over the Bering Strait and populated the Americas.
So from the edge of the Asian continent, or from the now vanished land of Beringia, the ancestors of the Anzic child came to North America, bearing a genetic signature found nowhere else in the world. So from the edge of the Asian continent, or from the now vanished land of Beringia, the ancestors of the Anzic child came to North America, bearing a genetic signature found nowhere else in the world, and would pass it to generations of Native Americans to come.
That would fit with the idea that you see Native Americans as being something genetically completely unique.
Back in Montana, Sarah and Eska were nervous about releasing the study's results, wondering what Native American reactions would be.
We didn't want to publish without some communication to the local tribes to tell them about it.
Look at the tassels.
We didn't want them hearing about this for the first time through a publication.
They invited Crow historian Shane Doyle to the discovery site to assess his reaction to the study and their findings.
We met him at the Anzic site, and he knew nothing about this, what we have found, and he became extremely emotional.
Wake up, Israel.
He started playing a song.
Hey, hey,
I was really overwhelmed with emotion. The results show that American Indians are from America. We don't come from any place else. Nowhere else in the world is there Native American DNA except for the Americas.
That's the lie.
But Shane told them the tribes would now want the child reburied.
We understand that the study's been made and we can't go back in time.
This is the lie. We all know they're from Africa. They're the people that went to leprosy.
What we have
But
found.
you know that they're promoted over your ass.
He became extremely emotional. And he took out his drum and he started playing a song.
was really overwhelmed with emotion. The results show that American Indians are from America. We don't come from any place else. Nowhere else in the world is there Native American DNA except for the Americas.
But Shane told them the tribes would now want the child reburied.
We understand that the study's been made and we can't go back in time now. And so I think you should put the boy back. He's given us all this information and now it's time to return the favor and put him back where his parents left him, where his grandparents shed tears for him, and it's just the right thing to do.
On a rainy fall day, representatives of various local tribes joined in a solemn ceremony to return this special child, their most ancient relative, to his original resting place. Initially, Sarah and Eska had misgivings about Shane's request to rebury remains that would be lost to science forever.
I had a huge conflict. I had a scientific community who was telling me how important this was. And then I also had the Native American communities who were also very passionate about seeing this child go back to his resting place.
It had been a long and emotional struggle for Sarah Anzic. But in the end, she did what she always knew she would.
From the first day that I set eyes on these remains, I had always felt like it had a story to tell, you know? And I just felt like it was important that this child had the chance to tell his story.
And as it turns out, the child called Anzic is far more significant than anyone could have imagined. Close to 80% of all living Native Americans carry his genome. And that percentage is even higher in Central and South America. This means the descendants of a single band of Ice Age hunter-gatherers who crossed the Bering Straits around 15,000 years ago would eventually create virtually all the great civilizations of North and South America that flowered long before European contact. By 5,000 years ago, there was just one frontier left for humans to conquer: the mighty Pacific. Almost 10,000 miles wide, the Pacific Ocean covers about a third of the Earth's surface. Its islands are like surface. Who crossed the Bering Straits around 15,000 years ago
That's
would
you,
eventually create virtually all the great civilizations of North
Cherokee,
and South America that
Maya,
flowered long before
Aztec,
European contact.
and they want to make like it's a mongoloid. Another
15,000 years
hijack.
ago, would eventually create virtually all the great civilizations of North and South America that flowered long before European contact.
Flowered long before European contact. And they were not mongoloids. They were Afro.
Would eventually create virtually all the great civilizations of North and South America.
Get with the program. Wake up. You're in the land of Nod. Wake up.
By 5,000 years
We
ago,
always say
there
that.
was
Wake
just
the
one
fuck up.
frontier left for humans to conquer:
Is that coincidence?
the
No.
mighty Pacific.
You're in the land of Nod.
Almost 10,000 miles wide, the Pacific Ocean covers about a third of the Earth's surface. Its islands are like grains of sand scattered across a vast blue void. Yet somehow, early humans managed to reach them all.
These are distances that are greater than the distance across Europe. The whole settlement of the Pacific really is something that's under-celebrated and undervalued in terms of representing, the capabilities of these people thousands of years ago. They did an amazing thing.
In the 18th century, when England's Captain Cook arrived in the Hawaiian Islands, he found people he called Polynesians had been there long before him. How was this possible?
Repainting.
Cook needed navigational charts and full-masted ships to reach the middle of the Pacific. While Polynesians had less sophisticated-looking boats,
they redrew them as white.
with no charts.
That they're Afro, they're Asiatic.
So how did they reach
Negroes.
specks of land in the middle of a 10,000-mile wide
Indios.
ocean?
God's people. Children of the
Experts believe
rainbow.
The first people to reach Pacific Islands drifted on crude boats pushed by trade winds that blew west from South America. This theory of accidental drift originated with Thor Heyerdahl, a visionary Norwegian explorer. In 1947, Heyerdahl and a small crew set off from Peru to prove his theory.
Peru, the naval.
The men built a balsa wood craft called Kontiki and just drifted westward on the currents. After 101 days, they crashed into a reef off a tiny island in the South Pacific. Luckily, no one drowned. It was an extraordinary adventure that embedded in the public imagination the idea that humans from South America settled the Pacific. It was an extraordinary adventure that embedded in the public imagination the idea that humans from South America settled the Pacific. But was Heyerdahl correct? Anxious to learn more about the famed explorer, Niobe traveled to Oslo to meet Heyerdahl's son.
Well, the funny thing with my father was that I'm myself a traditional academic. I'm trained to collect samples, data, analyze it, and draw conclusions from what I found. My father, he jumped to the conclusion first. He was in many ways also an artist with imagination. He started with the conclusion and worked his way backwards. Like a lawyer defending his suspect.
To Heyerdahl, his main idea was those people came from South America, the Polynesians and those guys, because they were sitting in the wind with their boats and the wind would blow them to the northwest. A completely anthropocentric European idea.
And wrong as well. Recent genetic studies of Pacific Islanders reveal their origins are not in the Americas, but in Asia.
Yep. But not Mongoloid. Don't let them fool you.
Islanders reveal their origins are not in the Americas.
Try to show
but
you
in
the
Asia.
Mongoloid. They just said that they're not Asian in this last one where the Native Americans said, we're not Asian and we're not European.
Recent genetic studies of Pacific Islanders reveal their origins are not in the Americas, but in Asia.
If we look at the Polynesians and their other, close relatives in Micronesia and parts of eastern Melanesia, they share many of these genetic traits all the way back to Taiwan. So a lot of the genetic evidence that's emerged in the last 2 decades has helped to reinforce the picture that
First off, they brought in the 1800s Mongoloids to mix in with the Negroes to not say they are related.
Giving us for quite a while. That archaeological evidence reveals human populations migrated into Southeast Asia that by at least 40,000 years ago had managed to reach island groups such as Indonesia and the Philippines, perhaps when sea levels were lower, narrowing the channels.
For early humans crossing the Asian continent, this should have been the end of the line. Southeast Asia, on the edge of the mighty Pacific Ocean, an impassable barrier to the further colonization of the planet. Except, it wasn't really a barrier. Just like for these Philippine Islanders today, our ancestors found ways to live with the sea, and soon they were crossing it.
The wonder is that Heyerdahl and other experts could not see the obvious. There are perhaps no other cultures as comfortable at living with the sea as the inhabitants of the Pacific Islands. That they, and not people from South America, would conquer the Pacific now seems obvious. But how exactly did they do it? The first thing they needed was the right kind of boat. There is no archaeological evidence of the earliest boats, but there is one place that might offer a clue. Papua New Guinea, the world's largest tropical island, which lies just west of Indonesia. The immense Seafaring River drains a tropical wilderness.
Who bearded afros?
Here, humans live in a labyrinth of streams and swamps,